If you set two glasses on a table, one filled with liquor and the other holding a rolled plant, you are not just choosing between flavors. You are choosing between two ways the human brain can bend, two kinds of nights, two very different kinds of fallout. People argue about which one is worse as if there is a single neat answer hiding behind the label. But the truth is more textured. Alcohol and cannabis both change how nerves talk, how danger feels, how we judge risk, how we sleep, and how kindly or carelessly we treat each other. The fairest way to compare them is to follow the trail of effects. What happens inside the body? What happens in the mind? What happens to choices? And what happens to the people around us? Start with the burn in the glass. Ethanol is not a cuddly molecule. It slips into the bloodstream quickly, crosses into the brain, and starts turning dials that control balance, inhibition, and reaction time. The first sips bring that familiar warmth across the face and a small loosening of social brakes. That is the sales pitch. The fine print is that alcohol stresses almost every organ that keeps you alive. The liver must scramble to detoxify it. And as drinking grows from occasional to routine, the tissue that filters your blood can change from soft and resilient to stitched with scar. The stomach lining gets irritated. The esophagus is challenged by repeated exposure to acid and alcohol. Blood pressure can creep up, the heart can be strained, and the brain, which learns from every repeated pattern, begins to treat the bottle like a shortcut it cannot live without. Dependence is not a word people like to put next to their own names. But dependence grows exactly the way ivy grows along a wall. Slowly, almost invisibly, until you wake up and notice the bricks are gone. With alcohol, the brain adapts to frequent sedation by turning its natural calming signals down. Take the sedative away without a plan, and the nervous system rebounds too hard. Hands shake, sleep evaporates, the heart gallops. Fear spikes for no obvious reason. In very severe cases, people hallucinate and seize. That withdrawal storm is one of the reasons alcohol is in a different league of danger. The drug that felt like a friend at midnight can feel like a jailer at noon. Even before long-term disease lands, there is the wreckage caused by disinhibition. Alcohol quiets the part of the brain that says, maybe do not, maybe wait, maybe think again. With that voice muted, a quiet person can become reckless. A gentle person can become unkind. And a guarded person can overshare secrets that cannot be resealed. A car key looks harmless. A staircase looks simple. A stranger's raised eyebrow looks like a challenge. Accidents and arguments bloom in that warped garden. Hospitals know the pattern by heart. Now shift to the rolled plant. Cannabis takes a different path to a different sort of high. The main psychoactive compound, THC, catches a ride on smoke or vapor, travels through the lungs, and lands on receptors that the body already uses for its own endocannabinoids. Those receptors help tune mood, appetite, pain signaling, stress responses, and memory. That is why a tight mind can soften, why music can sit deeper in the chest, why food can seem to glow. Eat cannabis instead of inhaling it, and the onset can be slow, but the duration can stretch much longer, which is a gentle invitation for experienced users and a trapdoor for people who do not realize how much they have had, until the room tilts. The immediate risk profile of cannabis is not the same as alcohol. It does not shut down breathing in the way high-dose alcohol or certain pills can. Fatal overdoses from cannabis alone are exceedingly rare. The acute problems tend to be panic, confusion, impaired coordination, and in some people a fierce, pounding anxiety that can feel like a heart attack but is not. Driving high is dangerous, not because the lungs are failing, but because perception and reaction time are altered. The difference matters, but it does not make cannabis harmless. It only makes the shape of its harm different. The question everyone asks next is about addiction. For years, the conversation about cannabis swung between scolding exaggeration and casual dismissal. The balanced view is that cannabis can absolutely be habit-forming. A substantial minority of daily users find that cutting back brings short-lived withdrawal symptoms, irritability, restless sleep, odd dreams, sweat, a flat mood, and low appetite. This is real, but the danger curve is not as steep as it is with alcohol. You can stop cannabis without risking your life. You can stop alcohol abruptly and land in a medical emergency. That single contrast does not answer the overall question of which is worse. It only draws one bright line between the two. Long-term risks deserve an honest accounting. Heavy alcohol use is linked to scarring of the liver, damage to the heart muscle, high blood pressure, strokes, memory problems, several cancers, and a shadow that falls across mental health. Depression and anxiety can be both reasons people drink and consequences of drinking more than the mind can process. It becomes a loop that feels airtight until someone breaks it on purpose. Cannabis, especially when smoked, is tough on the airways. Chronic cough and irritation are common in people who inhale daily. Some studies suggest airflow limitations even without tobacco, others do not. The science winds back and forth, but no pulmonologist recommends daily smoke of any kind as a wellness plan. Cannabis also pushes the heart rate up for a couple of hours after use. For a young, healthy person, that is usually a shrug. For someone with coronary artery disease, it can be risky. There are subtle cognitive effects to keep in view too. Frequent heavy use can fog short-term memory and focus, makes learning new material harder, and for some people, flattens motivation. Those changes are often reversible with sustained abstinence, but they can derail a semester, a project, or a career in ways that do not show up on a medical scan. Mental health is the hardest terrain to describe simply. For many, cannabis is a balm that softens worry and helps sleep take root. For others, especially at high doses, it can produce paranoia and panic. There is also a narrow but important doorway into psychosis for vulnerable individuals. People with a strong family history of schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders seem to have a higher risk that heavy, potent cannabis use will tip them into a first episode. This does not happen to most users. It is, however, a real hazard for a small group. And anyone who has felt themselves losing the thread of reality after use should take that red flag seriously and step away. Pregnancy and developing brains change the calculus. Alcohol during pregnancy can damage a developing fetus in ways that last a lifetime, including learning difficulties, impulse control problems, and distinctive patterns of facial and brain development that fall under a spectrum of diagnoses. There is no amount of alcohol in pregnancy that has been proven safe. Cannabis during pregnancy and breastfeeding is a different conversation with more uncertainty, but the absence of clarity is not a green light. Because cannabinoids interact with the signals that guide brain growth, caution is wise. The safest route for both substances during pregnancy is avoidance. Youth is another axis of risk. The teen and young adult brain is still wiring connections and pruning others. Alcohol strips away judgment in a brain that is already tilted toward novelty and social reward. That is why nights can end in crashes, fights, and regrets that sit heavy for years. Cannabis can make school feel pointless and sap the drive needed to push through boring but necessary steps. Neither substance pairs well with a brain that is still under construction. Delay is not just moralizing advice. It is a practical way to reduce the odds of harm. Social impact is where alcohol often overwhelms the debate. When people drink, they do not just change their own mood. They change the safety of the room they are in. Violence rises in the presence of alcohol. Arguments escalate. Old hurts jump off the shelf. Combine alcohol with driving, and the roads turn into a lottery nobody wants to win. Workplaces feel the drag the following morning in ways that are measurable, but rarely admitted. Cannabis has a social footprint too. Impaired driving is real. So is lost productivity for heavy users. But the volume of chaos tied directly to alcohol is higher, especially where cheap liquor is easy to buy and cultural norms celebrate going hard. Still, the comparison is not a morality play with a hero and a villain. Some people find cannabis helpful as a ladder out of heavier, more dangerous use of alcohol or sedatives, replacing a nightly blackout with a small dose that helps them sleep and reduces cravings. Others discover that cannabis keeps them stuck in place, numbing discomfort they actually need to feel in order to change. Context, dosage, and personal history steer the outcome. The same is true with alcohol. A small toast at a celebration is not the same as a fifth of spirits alone at dawn. The difference between those scenes is not just what is in the glass. It is the pattern and the purpose behind it. There is also the matter of purity and potency. Modern cannabis can be far more powerful than the plant many older people experimented with years ago, and concentrates can multiply that intensity. That means a single dab or a square of edible chocolate can ambush someone who assumes old rules still apply. Alcohol is labeled by volume. People know roughly what a shot, a glass of wine, or a beer contains. Cannabis dosing is harder for casual users to gauge, and different routes of administration change the time course in ways that beginners often misread. Education is not glamorous, but it is life-saving. If you are comparing the two substances by one blunt measure, what is more likely to end a life quickly? Alcohol wins in the worst way. If you compare by chronic wear and tear across populations, alcohol again carries the heavier burden. If you compare by acute overdose toxicity, cannabis looks far less dangerous. If you compare by the possibility of triggering psychosis in vulnerable people, cannabis has a real, if uncommon, risk that cannot be waved away. A fair conclusion is not that one is saintly and the other demonic. It is that alcohol causes broader, more catastrophic harm more often, while cannabis presents a narrower set of risks that still matter very much for certain bodies, ages, and minds. That is the landscape. Next comes the part people can actually use. How to decide, how to protect yourself or someone you love. How to spot when a relationship with either substance is slipping from occasional, mindful use into something that uses you instead. This part is about living on it without falling into the sinkholes. The simplest truth is that neither substance can make a hard day disappear for free. Both ask for something in return. The cost shows up in different currencies. With alcohol, it is often chaos and injury and organ damage. With cannabis, it can be fog, dependence for a minority, and in a vulnerable few, a crack in the mind that is scary to witness and even harder to endure. The decision you make is less about which team you join and more about how closely you pay attention to your own reactions, your family history, your responsibilities, and the people who share your space. Think about the way either substance wields time. Alcohol compresses the night and sometimes erases it. Hours go missing, conversations spill into corners you did not plan to visit, and morning arrives with questions you do not want to answer. Cannabis stretches time. Minutes feel braided, and textures seem thicker than they are. That can be pleasant in safe rooms and a problem where alertness matters. Neither effect is inherently good or bad. The context decides. What is fun at home is hazardous at an intersection. What is relaxing in a living room is inexcusable behind a steering wheel. People love to place the blame entirely on a liquid or a flower. But in real life, the worst outcomes grow from the combination of a drug and a decision in a setting that punishes mistakes. Consider driving. Alcohol shreds reaction time and judgment and makes speed feel reasonable when it is not. A person who would never gamble with the lives of strangers sober will do exactly that once their prefrontal brakes are off. Cannabis alters tracking and slows responses too. And despite a different mechanism, the result can still be a lane drift, a missed light, a corner taken wide. The clean rule is, do not drive under the influence, period. And do not ride with someone who insists they are fine when their pupils and their words argue otherwise. That single boundary saves more lives than any clever argument about which drug is worse. Now look at the homes we build. Alcohol is a weather system that blows through families. The person drinking might want nothing more than relief and company. Yet the bottle keeps rewriting the script. Promises fray. Tempers shorten. The mood of the house depends on whether there is whiskey in the cabinet. Cannabis changes homes in a quieter way. Heavy daily use can turn evenings into a ritual of checking out, where the body is present but the mind is a few steps away, where chores and conversations get delayed until tomorrow, and then another tomorrow. One is loud wreckage, the other is a slow drift. Children notice both. Partners notice both. Love can survive either. But love does not grow in their shade. If you are trying to choose the lesser harm for yourself, a few guiding ideas help, even if you never say them out loud. Purpose matters. Using either substance to enhance a celebration or soften physical pain. Pain after a tough day of honest work is a different thing than using it to silence grief you refuse to process or to avoid a conversation that must be had. Frequency matters. A rare toast is not the same as a nightly coping mechanism. Dose matters. With alcohol, small amounts for many people produce a mild social looseness. Beyond a certain point, the slope turns steep, and you meet a version of yourself you do not like. With cannabis, a tiny dose can relax a mind. A large dose can unspool it. Root matters. Smoke is hard on lungs. Edibles last longer and can ambush the inexperienced. Vapors avoid combustion, but are not a blank check. Setting matters. A couch is forgiving, a rooftop edge is not. It is worth saying plainly that mixing is a multiplier. Alcohol plus cannabis can make people greener than either alone. And the very confidence alcohol gives can push someone to redose cannabis too quickly, especially with edibles that hide their punch. If you combine and feel the room tilt, the safest move is to stop adding anything, sip water, breathe slowly, and call it a night. Pride is not an antidote. Time is. Pregnancy sits outside personal preference. The safest answer is avoidance of both. Alcohol can leave marks on a developing brain that last as long as that person lives. Cannabis interacts with the same signals that shape that brain. And while the science contains unanswered questions, unanswered does not mean safe. If you are growing a life inside your body, treat that space like sacred ground. There are other tools for nausea and pain that a clinician can tailor for you. And there is no party worth the risk. Age matters too. The brain in the second decade and the early years of the third is still pruning and strengthening connections. Alcohol during that window puts a premium on the thrill of the moment and discounts consequences, which is why the ugliest stories so often include someone under 25. Cannabis during those same years can cut motivation just when school or apprenticeship or early career requires focus and persistence. Waiting is underrated wisdom. The later you introduce any intoxicant, the more solid your foundation will be. There is the delicate subject of mental health. Many people use cannabis to quiet anxiety and irritability and sleep disturbances. For some this works. For some it works for a while and then works less. And for a small group, it makes things worse. Pay attention to your own mind. If you notice rising paranoia, if your thoughts start to feel like strangers, if sleep fills with threatening dreams, those signals mean step back. If you or close relatives have experienced psychosis or schizophrenia, the risk from high-potency cannabis is not a rumor. It is a real doorway, best left closed. Alcohol has its own mental health boomerang. It can feel like an anxiolytic in the moment, only to rebound into a darker, more agitated mood the next day. Patterns of drinking to quell worry can quietly deepen that worry. The bravest move is not to white-knuckle it alone. It is to tell the truth to a professional who has seen hundreds of people in the same tangle and knows the exits. Workplaces and schools are small ecosystems that reflect your relationship to substances long before you say a word. Alcohol shows up as tardiness after a night out, as missed deadlines, as short fuses in meetings, as risky jokes that land like lead. Cannabis shows up as a creeping indifference, a lack of follow-through, as creativity without delivery, as a calendar full of starts and thin-on finishes. The people around you will not always know why your edge is duller. They will only feel that your reliability has slipped. If you want to protect your reputation, protect your sleep, your mornings, and your promises. Both substances can steal those if you let them. The law is the background music to all of this. A drink in places where it is legal and regulated may be completely ordinary. The same drink behind the wheel turns you into a danger with a criminal record on the way. Cannabis legality varies widely by location, and legal does not mean harmless, just as illegal does not mean always disastrous. The smarter frame is responsibility. Know your local rules. Respect the rules even if you disagree with them. If your job depends on clean screens, remember that your opinion on policy does not matter to a lab report. When people ask which is worse, what they often want is permission or proof. They want to hear that one choice is safe, so they can move toward it without a second thought. The honest answer pushes back. Alcohol is responsible for broader and more catastrophic damage across societies because it is widely used, aggressively marketed, and uniquely efficient at turning poor choices into tragedies. Cannabis is less likely to kill quickly and more likely to create subtle, cumulative problems in concentration, mood, and motivation, with a small but serious risk of psychosis for susceptible individuals. If you are choosing based on the odds of immediate disaster, alcohol is the heavier threat. If you are choosing based on the odds of a discreet evening at home without your lungs or your heart paying later, small, thoughtful doses of cannabis will often carry less risk for an adult whose mind is otherwise healthy. For a teenager, for a pregnant person, for someone with a family history of psychosis or with heart disease, the calculus flips toward avoidance of cannabis as well. For someone with a frail liver or a history of violence or crashes, avoidance of alcohol is not just smart, it is essential. Harm reduction is not defeat, it is maturity. If you drink, eat beforehand, hydrate, pace yourself, stop early, and learn the sensation of enough. Lock in your ride before you start. If you use cannabis, start low. Wait long enough to feel the full effect before adding more. Choose situations where you do not need to operate machines or make complicated decisions, and give your lungs a break whenever you can. Build substance-free days into your week so you can hear your baseline. Notice whether your relationships feel more open or more tense. Notice whether your work is growing or just getting done. Notice whether you feel more like yourself or less.
There are red flags you should never argue with. If your mornings are a chain of apologies, if you keep promising to cut back and do not, if you hide bottles or stash gummies in places even you forget until they reappear, if your partner flinches at your habits, if your friends stop calling, if your job is at risk, these are not warning lights to be taped over. They are invitations to step out of a cycle. While you still can, help exists in many shapes. Medical detox for heavy drinkers who should never quit abruptly without supervision. Counseling that helps you build new routines. Mutual support communities where people who have walked the same road show you the turns you cannot yet see. And in some cases, medications or structured programs that change the odds in your favor. There is also room here for compassion. People use alcohol and cannabis for reasons that are not stupid or weak. They use them for warmth, for comfort, for celebration, for relief, for a few hours off from a mind that will not quiet. The question is not whether those reasons are valid. The question is whether the tool you are using is quietly taking more than it gives. The bravest people in any room are not the ones who can outdrink the table or pack the fattest cone. They are the ones who can say enough and mean it, the ones who take responsibility for their impact on others, the ones who change course when the cost grows too high. If you want a single sentence to carry away, make it this. For most adults, alcohol causes more and deadlier harm. Cannabis causes less and subtler harm, and neither deserves your blind trust. Choose the smallest effective dose, choose the safest setting, choose the longest intervals between use, choose honest friends who will tell you if they see you changing in ways you do not like, and choose mornings you can be proud of. The future you are building does not care about substances. It cares about the hours you invest, the promises you keep, and the health you protect. You can live well without any of it. Many people do and find life brighter for it. If you choose to partake, do it like someone who plans to be around for decades, with a body that works and a mind that remembers, with a reputation that makes people relax when you walk in the door, not brace. The measure of a night is not how far you drifted from yourself. It is how fully you can show up the next day. If you keep that truth close, the question of which is worse becomes smaller, because you will have made a better choice long before the debate finishes.